We're trying to get cars built in the United States. Detroit has been really tough. It's been a disaster. They have a huge factory, a huge car auto plant being built by China in Mexico, make cars, sell them in the United States, put everybody out of business. Right, here we go again. I said, if that plant is there when I'm president, I will put 100 or 200% tariffs on every car. They'll be unsaleable in the United States. And they just announced they're not going to build the plant because they think I'm going to win. Think of it. They're not going to build the plant. This was the biggest plant in the world. It would have more than all of Michigan makes. That's how big. This is what we're getting to. And I said, if that plan goes up, I want them to understand if I win, I'm going to tax those cars at the rate of 100 or 200% apiece so that you won't be able to sell them in the United States. They just announced they're not going to build the plant.
Yeah. David, it looks like now components are going to be tariffed on top of the assembled vehicle tariff of 25%.
There was a time when Detroit's skyline glowed red with the fire of furnaces, when the midnight air hummed with the clatter of assembly lines, and when car keys jingling in a worker's hand symbolized the very definition of the American dream. But walk those streets today, and you will find silence where engines once roared, darkness where factory lights once burned, and despair where entire neighborhoods once pulsed with middle-class security. This wasn't supposed to happen. Tariffs, we were told, would bring back jobs, rebuild factories, and force automakers to put "Made in America" on every badge. Instead, the opposite unfolded. 5 of America's largest car giants quietly began packing their bags to flee. The very companies the tariffs were meant to protect, like Ford, GM, Chevrolet, and Stellantis, chose exile over extinction. And here's the chilling irony. As America strangled its own industry with 25% tariffs on cars, Canada stepped in with open arms, incentives worth billions, and an offer too good to refuse. Detroit was left to rot while Ontario's factories lit up. The city that once built the Model T and gave the world the assembly line has turned into a ghost town. The question hangs heavy. What really happened, and why did America's greatest industrial empire collapse under its own policies? In this video, let's find out. Number 5. General Motors. GM had long been treated as the immovable giant of American industry. In 2008, when the financial crisis nearly destroyed the auto sector, Washington stepped in with a historic bailout, proving that GM was considered too big to fail. For decades, GM was Detroit's anchor, employing hundreds of thousands, shaping entire communities, and keeping the city alive through good times and bad. But tariffs were an adversary that bailouts couldn't cure. By mid-2025, GM's quarterly reports revealed the grim truth: a $1.1 billion loss in just 3 months, with projections of $5 billion in annual losses if tariff pressures remained. Tariffs inflated the cost of building each vehicle by thousands. Models like the Silverado pickup and the Blazer SUV, once GM's bread and butter, suddenly cost $3,000 more per unit to produce. In an already tight consumer market, where buyers were sensitive to even small price hikes, this was unsustainable. Faced with an impossible choice to either raise prices beyond what average Americans could afford or move production abroad, GM chose the latter. Plants in Michigan, Texas, and Missouri went dark. Thousands of workers lost their jobs, entire dealerships closed their doors, and once stable factory towns were reduced to ghostly shells of their former selves. Communities that had been built around GM plants for generations, where schools, restaurants, and local economies thrived on auto wages, suddenly collapsed into unemployment and despair. The scale of the devastation was staggering. More than 50,000 jobs vanished, wiping out livelihoods across multiple states. For the first time in living memory, the notion of GM as the unshakable backbone of American industry cracked wide open. The same company that survived the Great Depression, World Wars, and oil crises could not withstand the weight of tariffs that were supposed to defend it. Adding to the insult, GM shifted production south to Mexico and east to South Korea. In doing so, the very goal of Trump's tariffs, to keep jobs and factories inside America's borders, was turned upside down. The U.S. government effectively forced its largest automaker to outsource, undermining not just workers, but also the brand's identity as an American icon. The irony is brutal. A policy designed to make GM stronger at home made it weaker abroad. For the first time, America's largest automaker became less American, its badge tarnished by the reality of foreign production. Number 4. Chevrolet. If General Motors represented Detroit's industrial backbone, Chevrolet was its beating heart. Chevy wasn't just a brand, it was the everyday face of American mobility. From the Malibu sedans parked in suburban driveways to the Silverado pickups roaring down construction sites and highways, Chevrolet embodied reliability, affordability, and American toughness. For decades, the brand symbolized middle-class aspiration. But tariffs turned Chevy's greatest strength, its wide range of vehicles, into a crippling liability. Every steel frame, every aluminum panel, and every imported electronic module suddenly carried extra costs. The tariff wall, meant to block foreign competition, effectively taxed Chevy's own assembly lines into paralysis. Production costs for key models like the Silverado soared by thousands of dollars per unit, pushing them into price ranges that ordinary Americans could no longer justify. The result was brutal. Plants in Michigan, Texas, and Missouri, once roaring with engines and alive with union labor, fell silent. Assembly lines that had defined community life for generations shut down, leaving entire towns hollowed out. Tens of thousands of workers who proudly wore the Chevrolet logo on their uniforms now walked home with pink slips, watching their paychecks vanish alongside the echo of factory sirens. And unlike in previous crises, Chevy couldn't lean on global sales to cushion the blow. America's share of the global auto market nosedived from 18% to below 12% in just 2 years, with Chevy's decline leading the fall. In markets like Latin America, Europe, and Asia, where affordability and reliability had once made Chevrolet competitive, higher production costs and supply chain chaos erased its edge. Competitors from South Korea, Japan, and even China filled the vacuum, selling cheaper models while Chevy's lineup stagnated under tariff inflation. This was more than an economic downturn. It was an identity crisis. For the first time in living memory, Detroit wasn't just competing with rivals, it was being overtaken by them. The Chevrolet bow tie, once a global badge of American confidence, now symbolized decline. The Heartbeat of America campaign that defined Chevy in the 1980s felt painfully ironic in 2025 when the pulse of its factories stopped. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, and current affairs impacting your lives. Number 3. Tesla. While Chevy's decline revealed the fragility of old Detroit, Tesla highlighted the resilience and limits of the new. Elon Musk's company has always branded itself as the future of American automaking, and in some ways, tariffs reinforced that identity. With most of Tesla's vehicles assembled in the U.S. and a majority of parts sourced domestically, Tesla was spared the worst of the tariff storm. But Musk himself was quick to clarify. Tesla was not unscathed. Writing on X, he admitted that imported components, especially from China, still carried costs. Batteries, in particular, remained vulnerable. Tesla's dependence on Chinese battery cells, despite efforts to localize production in Nevada and Texas, meant that tariffs still trickled into the company's bottom line. Analysts estimated that while Tesla could absorb more of the shock than GM or Ford, it still faced notable price pressures. Industry experts like Art Wheaton of Cornell University pointed out that Tesla's domestic heavy supply chain insulated it, but didn't shield it completely. Every imported semiconductor, sensor, or battery module became more expensive. The brand's reliance on globalized technology, even if less than that of its rivals, was still a liability in a tariff-driven economy. Yet, Tesla's survival revealed another uncomfortable truth. The very policy designed to protect traditional Detroit icons like Chevy ended up strengthening Silicon Valley disruptors like Tesla. While Chevy's factories went dark, Tesla's gigafactories in Texas and Nevada continued humming, even if at a higher cost. In effect, tariffs deepened the divide between the old industrial order and the new tech-driven one, accelerating the decline of legacy automakers while handing relative resilience to their challengers. Number 2. Stellantis. Stellantis, the parent company of Chrysler, Dodge, and Jeep, was once seen as the embodiment of Detroit's resilience. Chrysler had always been the smallest of the big three, the scrappy survivor that managed to endure bankruptcies, bailouts, and foreign takeovers. By the time it became part of Stellantis through a merger with Europe's PSA Group, many believed the company had finally found stability. It had the backing of a global conglomerate, a diverse lineup of vehicles, and the promise of balancing Detroit's legacy with international resources. For a while, it looked like Stellantis might be the comeback story Motor City desperately needed. Each brand under Stellantis carried weight in the American imagination. Jeep was rugged and adventurous, long marketed as the vehicle of veterans, explorers, and suburban families who craved an edge of rebellion. Chrysler minivans defined family life for generations, becoming symbols of middle-class suburbia from the 1980s onward. Dodge, with its Challenger and Charger muscle cars, kept alive Detroit's rebellious roar in an era increasingly dominated by sleek imports and quiet electric vehicles. Taken together, Stellantis stood not just for cars, but for an American way of life that was still tied to horsepower, utility, and grit. The tariff war, however, cared little for heritage or identity. Trump's 25% tariffs on steel, aluminum, and auto parts turned Stellantis' business model upside down. Unlike Tesla, which had concentrated its production largely within the United States, Stellantis relied heavily on cross-border supply chains. Engines, transmissions, and body panels often crossed from Mexico to the US or Canada multiple times before final assembly. Under the new tariff regime, every crossing became a tax point. Instead of flowing seamlessly, Stellantis' supply chain became clogged with costs. Steel prices surged, aluminum imports were burdened, and critical electronics sourced from Mexico carried new levies. Suddenly, the cost of building each vehicle swelled beyond profitability. The consequences were immediate and brutal. Stellantis suspended operations in multiple U.S. plants, including in Michigan and Indiana, leading to the loss of nearly 900 jobs. For those communities, the impact was devastating. Auto plants weren't just job sites, they were lifelines for local economies, supporting diners, shops, schools, and entire neighborhoods. With each job cut, dozens of other livelihoods were disrupted, creating ripple effects of economic despair. The collapse didn't stop at the U.S. border. In Windsor, Ontario, Chrysler's historic minivan plant, long a symbol of cross-border cooperation between Canada and the United States, was forced to lay off another 900 workers. It was a reminder that when Detroit suffers, the interconnected North American auto ecosystem suffers alongside it. However, instead of stabilizing as many had hoped, Stellantis found itself adrift, with no clear path back to profitability under Trump's tariff regime. Jeep, once a reliable cash cow, became more expensive to produce and lost some of its competitive edge in a market where consumers were growing more price-sensitive. Chrysler minivans struggled to compete with cheaper imports from Asia, while Dodge muscle cars, already niche in a market shifting rapidly toward electric vehicles, became harder to justify with rising costs. The tariffs didn't just weaken Stellantis. They exposed its vulnerabilities, leaving the company staggering at the very moment it needed momentum to survive in a transforming industry. Number 1. Ford. Ford is not just a car company in the United States, it is part of the national identity itself. When Henry Ford introduced the Model T in 1908, he didn't simply manufacture a vehicle, he created a revolution. By perfecting the moving assembly line, Ford made cars affordable to the average worker, turning personal mobility into a possibility for middle-class families across America. The Model T symbolized not only technological innovation, but also social transformation, making independence and freedom accessible to millions. Detroit, powered by Ford's methods, became the beating heart of global industrialization, earning the nickname Motor City. For decades, Ford was more than a corporation. It was a symbol of American ingenuity, prosperity, and the dignity of labor. That is why its retreat in 2025 across the US-Canada border was nothing short of a shockwave. The move was not just a financial adjustment on a balance sheet. It was a cultural and historical rupture. The most painful aspect of this shift was the relocation of the Super Duty pickup truck's production line. For generations, this truck had been marketed as the embodiment of America's working-class strength. Farmers driving it across endless plains, builders relying on it at construction sites, military families seeing it as a symbol of durability and national pride. To imagine this essential American machine stamped with "Made in Canada" was more than a logistical change. It was a blow to national pride. It undermined the mythology of Detroit as the cradle of American industry and replaced it with the image of dependency on foreign soil, even if that soil was just across the northern border. However, the roots of Ford's exodus lay in tariffs imposed under President Trump's trade policy. What was meant to be a protective measure turned into a crippling burden. Tariffs struck at every layer of Ford's production process. The steel that formed the backbone of its vehicles, the aluminum that kept frames lighter and more efficient, and the semiconductors crucial for electric vehicles and advanced dashboards, all became subject to heavy taxation. Ford's supply chain, which had been optimized for efficiency over decades, suddenly became a minefield of costs. By 2025, tariffs had already added $2.5 billion in additional expenses. Combined with an already projected $1.5 billion in losses, Ford faced the very real possibility of collapse if it continued to operate under those conditions. What had been intended as a wall to shield American workers turned into a cage that suffocated the company's ability to compete. Canada saw its opening and acted decisively. In a rare display of coordinated industrial policy, Ottawa and Ontario jointly offered Ford a $590 million incentive package. The offer went beyond mere cash. It included tax relief, energy subsidies to cut manufacturing costs, and guarantees of supply chain stability that Washington could no longer assure. In a global industry where margins are thin and the difference between survival and collapse often comes down to policy, Ford's choice was obvious. It was not about patriotism, it was about survival. A company bleeding billions does not have the luxury of sentiment. It must go where it can breathe. For Ford, Canada became that place. What do you think? If Ford, the most American automaker of all, can abandon Detroit, what does that mean for the future of the U.S. industry? Did Trump's tariffs protect American workers, or did they hand Canada the victory of a lifetime? And if Detroit itself can be hollowed out, what other pillars of the American economy could collapse next? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, changing world order, and current affairs. Things you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.